Good afternoon, this is Karen Shannon. Today presenting barcoding for MES screens. We're going to review in presentation form and examples only. There won't be a demo in Epicor. Some of the options that are available for using barcoding with the MES screens and for any other parts of Epicor software as needed. This may be review for some of you, but hopefully you'll learn a couple of things new. So the first slide here just lists what the upcoming slides are going to cover and the different options for barcoding to use with MES screens and full Epicor screens. So we'll be talking about using SSRS barcode labels, SQL Server Reporting Services labels, and SSRS barcode reports. We'll also talk about using generic Bartender barcode labels. We'll also give the option about using custom Bartender barcode labels. Then we'll show some of the file locations that are used to output the data and where the Bartender labels are located in your file system. Then we'll show a slide that will show you some of the different screens that you can use in MES to scan barcodes into those MES screens. We'll only show a few examples, but almost any field in Epicor can be used to send a barcode to. And then we'll also show a few screens for scanning barcodes into the full Epicor system. So here we show an example of using SSRS barcode labels. The different points here show that your first step for using these barcode labels is to design a layout for your label. Then you can create a label using SSRS in one of the three different ways listed in the next bullet points. Creating a BAQ report, using an RDD report, or creating an SQL query to use with an SSRS report. So the first example shown as a screenshot is just an example of an employee badge you might use. It shows the employee name and the employee ID and then the barcoded employee ID. The second example is just showing a barcode of a part number. Then I'm going to actually open my files that show the examples listed here of using a BAQ, an RDD, or an SQL query to design your SSRS barcode labels. So first I'm showing an example of a shipping label that is the standard shipping label SSRS report used in Epicor 10. Just so you can see, this is a starting point for a label and then you can add barcodes to it. The second file here is an example of using a BAQ report that then is connected to SSRS, and the output is a report that has data as sort of we designed in the first screenshot to show the employee name, the employee ID, and their employee ID as a barcode. Now here we show that out of the box label that Epicor has for shipping labels using an report data definition, RDD, and we use that RDD and just added to the label the barcode for the part number. And you'll see, for example, I just added it quickly to this report, that when we scroll down, the size of the label is now changed. So you'll need to take that into consideration if you're going to add to an existing report, to keep in mind that you'll either need to remove some white space or change the size of your labels to make everything fit as you need them in your SSRS report label. Then the last example was using an SQL query to create an employee badge again. Here we have the name and the ID and the ID coded, and we just made it a little different in our SQL report by having a separate page for each employee that we selected to print in the SSRS report label. So that explains the using SSRS barcode labels, and next we'll move on to using SSRS barcode reports. So within Epicor there's many SSRS reports that already include barcodes. You just have to check when you try to go and print those reports to see if there is an option, usually a little checkbox that says print barcodes, because you can print with them or without them. The Job Traveler is an example report that does include barcodes, and when checking the SSRS report that comes with Epicor, it uses the font of DataWorks Bar 39, and 24 point is this font size used. And barcodes can be added to any SSRS report. The font used must be installed. I said here on the clients, but somebody else confirmed to me that it's probably just on the server. So I guess if you install it on the server, that's where to start, and if you still have issues, also install it on your client. I'm going to now open the Job Traveler so that we can see that example. So here is our Job Traveler that was output from Epicor, and we can see the highlighted fields has the job number both printed and barcoded. The assembly you might want to also barcode, and then the operation sequence is barcoded, and so is the description. And you also have your material barcoded here too. So you can use all of those in different places in Epicor to more easily enter your data into the system and more accurately. The next option for barcodes is using the generic Bartender barcode labels. Those that come with Epicor are what we call the generic Bartender labels. So again, the first step is to design any changes that you need to the generic Bartender label. They might be just fine out of the box, or you might want to tweak them to add another field or take away some information, etc. Then you're going to go ahead and determine a trigger to output the data needed for the label, and the third bullet point just says that there are generic Bartender report data definitions and report styles within Epicor, and the picture on the right hand side shows there are 6 different report data definitions, and they're labeled here. They all start with GEN for generic, and then you need to eventually connect the data to the Bartender label. And I just show a picture of the database connections setup that shows all the fields being brought over. You browse to a file as needed and you connect, but actually connecting to the Bartender label to the data is beyond this presentation. So this is just an example we show here. Some of the triggers you might use for outputting the data that will eventually connect to your Bartender labels would be using a BAM, Business Activity Manager, in Epicor 8 or 9, or you can also use a standard data directive in Epicor 10. Custom code can also be written for a button click in all of these versions. I'm now going to show an example of what these generic Bartender barcode labels look like. So on the left hand side we have the generic inventory tag from version Vantage 8, and then on the right hand side we have the same generic label in Epicor 10, and you can see there's really no difference between the two versions in these 6 different label formats. And so I'm just going to scroll through to show you the different formats that are available. We have the inventory tag. Here we have a job tag. Then we have what they call generic QA quality, and that's the Epicor RMA tag. A generic receipt for PO receipts, a generic shipping label to use with customer shipment entry, a generic sales order that shows Epicor sales tag information. So, they're somewhat busy, so you might use them and customize them to your needs, or you might find that instead of using the generic ones, you want to create one of your own that looks totally different. So if you need to create a bartender label that looks totally different than the generic ones, you're going to want to start with some of these steps again to design your layout for your label. Again, determining your triggers to output the data. You'll possibly use a custom button to call custom code, and very often this output from Epicor is a comma separated values file. Again, here we show just a screenshot of an example to connect the data file to the bartender label file. So the same triggers can be used as were used for the generic bartender barcode labels. Again, you can use a business activity manager option in Epicor 8 or 9, a standard data directive in Epicor 10. Custom code can be used on any of the versions to call the data with a button click and send it out to where bartender can pick up the data. And then, as we said, actually connecting the bartender label to the data is beyond this presentation, but here we show an example screen. File locations. I've just listed some example file locations for Vantage 8 or Epicor 9 and Epicor 10. Your exact file location may be slightly different, but this should give you an idea of where to look for your bartender labels and your bartender data. So the first link here shows where the generic Vantage 8 bartender labels are, and that they have an extension of .btw, and we show that Epicor 905 is used in that path instead of where it has MFG sys 803 for Epicor 9. Then the second file location shows where the data files are output for Vantage 8. And again, your specific path might be a little different. The data files have the extensions .bt, and Epicor data is used instead of MFG sys data for Epicor 9 in that path. Epicor 10 has a totally different path for holding the bartender labels. It's the inet pub www root path, and then it has server and reports, and that's where your bartender labels are, which still have the extensions of BTW. And then your data files are shown in the last file path, which could be slightly different for your server again. And top folder under your server is Epicor data, and then of course reports, and then your username is where the file is output to a bartender folder, and that holds your bartender data, which has the extensions of BT. So here we show some example pictures of places in your MES screens, manufacturing execution system screens. We show the first example is an employee badge for login. So there you could scan in those reports that we did earlier that show the employee ID as a barcoded scan. You might give your employees a lanyard with their picture and their employee ID to be able to scan in to log in to MES. You do want to make sure you have some security options in place so that nobody else can use their badge and log in for somebody else. You can also use barcodes for your start production activity screen. That's the second screenshot shown. And then your end activity and your report quantity screens. Most any field can be scanned into Epicor. Just keep in mind what labels or reports might be available to scan the input for the needed data. Also know that to move between fields, you need to include a tab either in your barcodes, or press the tab key manually, or your scanning device might have the ability to automatically enter a tab. Also, there is the possibility of custom code that can be used to add tabs and concatenate fields that are commonly scanned together, for example. So on your start production activity, you always need to enter the job, assembly, and operation. You might consider either on your job traveler or your job pick list or some other form to barcode those three fields, and you might also consider having another barcode that would combine those three fields and then use custom code so that they can be split out as needed. So your MES user would only need to scan one barcode if that's the choice you want to use. In the end activities screen here, we show that some of the areas you could consider for barcoding are your reason codes and your notes. If you have what we call a cheat sheet that lists all of your reason codes on it, then they could scan a barcode to pick which reason code is needed in that field for their scrap quantity or non-conforming quantity. And then if you have some common notes that usually they might enter as a reason for their scrap quantity, a note for their scrap quantity, or a note for their non-conforming quantity, then you could also have a cheat sheet to barcode those common notes, and then they could add to those common notes, most likely also in the end activity screen. You may or may not want to consider barcodes for quantities. Usually you would have different quantities, so it's pretty hard to have those all barcoded, but if you might have standard quantity in most of your finished boxes, etc., you might have a barcode for that, or you might still prefer to not have that barcoded so that the operator can confirm that they really made the full amount, or maybe they only made partial amount. And the same option is available for reporting quantity in MES. Again, you could have it barcoded, or you could choose not to have it barcoded if you wish. So that was the MES screens in Epicor that are some of the common ones that barcoding are used for. And here we have some examples of where to use barcodes in Epicor screens. So if your vendor sends barcodes for PO numbers and pack slips, you can use them on the receipt entry screen. Here we show highlighted the PO number and the pack slip. If they send those on their pack slip, then it'll make it easier for you to enter the receipt entry once they send the product into you. You can also scan from a job pick list to issue material, and we'll show an example, or show the report to you in a minute, and scan from a sales order pick list to ship releases. You can also scan from finished goods product labels once you have those in place to many areas in Epicor. For example, into shipping, into inventory transfers, year-end inventory, user tables, etc. So here we show the job pick list. Again, you can have a barcode for the job, assembly, and material, and then you can scan them into issue material, for example, in your full Epicor screen or your MES screen too, for that matter. You can see on the job pick list where to go and find your materials for the job. And here we have the example of the sales order pick list. And here you can see the order number is barcoded. The line currently is not barcoded and the release is not barcoded. So you might want to modify this report to include barcodes on those two fields so that if you use this report in customer shipment entry, you can scan each of those three barcodes to start your line for a customer shipment line. Again, you want to keep in mind that the tabbing requirements and that reports might need to be modified to include additional barcodes. Think about where you usually get your data to input it to see if the source can be barcoded. As mentioned, many fields in Epicor can accept a barcode scan. We only listed a few here. Barcoding can improve efficiency and accuracy of the data entered into your Epicor software program. So I hope you found this presentation beneficial, and we'll look at different ways that barcoding can help each of your companies. Get started soon on putting things in place to start using barcodes, and let us know if you would like Codabears to help with any portion of your barcoding future. Thank you for your time today.